Um, I'm joined also by Stuart Love, who's our Chief Executive of Westminster Council, and Stuart will be talking in a few minutes. Apologies as I'm talking, you may sort of hear people joining the meeting, because I'm conscious that there's quite a lot of people that want to join. So just bear with me as they're doing that. That's the disadvantage of live meetings when people are joining at the same time. We've got a very large number of people that have joined this meeting, so thank you all very much for taking the time today. I'm going to talk very briefly because I know that I'm very conscious that a lot of people want to contribute to this meeting, and so make sure we get to that part of the meeting as quickly as possible. I know also many of you that are on the call today, I visited you myself sort of personally. A lot of my own ward was badly affected by the floods sort of on the 12th, so I know what a difficult time, an awful time that everybody's had, and obviously you know, that was a terrible set of sort of floods that occurred, and then again obviously a couple of weeks later. So I'm not going to talk for very long. We'll need to get to the meat of the meeting pretty quickly. Joined in this meeting today also we have representatives from Thames Water. Okay, so we have from from Thames Water today, we have George Mayhew, who's their Corporate Affairs Director, Matt Rimmer, who's their Head of Waste Networks, and Mike Denk, who's their North London Local Government Lead. So those gentlemen are on the line with us, and I will turn to them shortly. We're hoping also to be joined by representatives from Octavia Housing and Notting Hill Genesis as well. So thank you all very much, as I say, for joining us today. What we will try and do during the meeting, apart from when people are joining, is that we will tend to meet you during the meeting to make sure we get the best quality of sound during the meeting. So apologies for sort of doing that, but it's the best way of actually of running the meeting. If you could also turn your cameras off, that would be quite helpful as well, except when you're speaking later on in the meeting, that would be really helpful. And that way we can actually just have on the screen those people that are actually speaking. So if you could do that now, that would be really helpful. And I can see a lot of you are doing that as we speak. So thank you very much for doing that. So just briefly, if anybody's got impaired hearing or anything like that, you can turn on the live captions of this meeting by clicking the 3 dots at the top of the screen, and then you'll be able to take a full part in the meeting by doing that. Okay, so that's kind of the housekeeping things. What I'm going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to ask Stuart Love to say a few words, then I'm going to ask representatives from Thames Water to say a few words. Quite a few people helpfully submitted some questions in advance for this meeting, and we've kind of grouped those together, and I will come to those a little bit later. But we're going to go through those aspects of the meeting, and then obviously turn to yourself, anybody that's on the call who wants to ask a question. I'll let you know very shortly how we do that. So that's a bit of housekeeping out of the way. I'm going to immediately now turn to our Chief Executive, Stuart Love, to say a few words. Then I'm going to ask Thames Water, and then we'll get into the main part of the meeting. So Stuart, if I can turn over to you now.
Thank you, Melvin, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stuart Love. I'm the Council's Chief Executive. I first just wanted to start by saying that our thoughts and sympathies are with all of you who have been affected by this. We have seen firsthand the devastating impact of this flooding. We've had, obviously, our staff been up there. Melvin referred to elected members, but we also have elected members and staff who have personally been affected by this. I really just wanted to say that our thoughts are with you, and we're doing everything we can to help and assist. We did put in place immediately an emergency response, working very closely with the fire brigade and others in the immediate impact and aftermath of the flooding. And subsequent to that, clearly we've been doing a lot of work around the clear up and other bits and pieces. We still have staff on site providing assistance where possible. And also, you know, over and above what we saw firsthand in speaking to you and seeing the impact of the flooding, we know just from the volume of calls that our contact centre has taken around this, just how widespread the impact of this has been. Just like Melvin, I don't want to speak for very long because this is much more about your questions for us in Thames Water. But just to say that on the back of this, there are 2 reviews that are underway. The first one is the council is undertaking a review of both our response and Thames Water's response. There is a statutory responsibility that we have in the aftermath of a flooding event to undertake an investigation into what happened, what went wrong, and that has now started. And similarly, Thames Water, I'm sure they want to say more about this, are undertaking or have commissioned an independent review of what happened, as well as their response to the flooding. And alongside that, from the council's perspective, we constantly need to listen to you, to learn and ensure that we are better in how we respond to these events in the future. So I will leave it at that. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. And Melvin, I think I'm handing back to you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. So just very briefly from me, I'm going to ask Thames Water to briefly say a few words at the start of the sort of meeting, and then we'll start getting to questions, those that have been posed online already or sent directly to us, and also those that come up from the meeting. If you do want to ask a question during this meeting, please put your name and your question into the chat so that I can call out those sort of questions as they sort of come forward. So please do that sort of throughout the meeting. I know 1 or 2 people have started to do that already, so thank you very much for sort of doing that. Let me now hand over to Thames Water. I don't know which of you is going to kick off. Is it are you, Matt, or George? Are you going to? George, I can see your.
It's me. Yeah.
Go ahead. So if you'd just like to say a few words at this stage before we get into questions. So George, go ahead.
Of course. Thank you very much, Councillor Kaplan. First of all, I would like to extend our deepest sympathies to all of those who've been impacted by this terrible event. Clearly, it's devastated so many people's lives, and like I said, we are so sorry for what's happened to you all. It's terrible. I would also like to apologise for those of you who tried to get through to Thames Water on the day of the storm and weren't able to. I'm not going to make any excuses for that at all. It was unacceptable. Our performance when it comes to call handling has not been good for many years. I can assure you that we do have plans to fix that quickly, that were put in place before this, that have been put in place, regardless of the storm, that we had to get on with this. But I particularly also want to apologise to the council, because I know that your contact centres had to pick up additional calls because our call handling was not adequate. In terms of the network, I know we'll cover this more in questions, and I know this will be I think quite a hard pill to swallow, but it did not fail. The issue was that it was it and I think the drainage system, which is not in Thames Water's control, was inundated by the intensity of the rainfall that happened on the 12th of July. Again, while I know that what I'm about to say doesn't help make the devastation that happened a few weeks ago any better at all, one of the things that we need to do collectively in terms of all those who have responsibilities for managing flood risk is to work together to come up with the solutions to deal with these so-called extreme and rare weather events, which seem to be happening with much more frequency, and certainly in our view at Thames are clearly linked to the impacts of climate change. There was mention of the independent review. Happy to pick up questions on that during the course of the next hour, but we are conducting an independent review, and the reason for that is to hopefully give a lot of you reassurance that we're going to the observations that we have about our performance of our assets are kind of backed up by experts and independent regulators, etc. So, Councillor, that was all I was going to say. We're very, very happy to take any questions at all from the residents.
Okay, George, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Right, so what I'm going to do now is, as I say, we've had a lot of questions that have already been submitted to us, and I'm going to read out some that we've grouped together, very common themes that people were asking about. So I'm going to pose 4 questions to Thames Water, and I'll get you to answer all these questions at the same time, if you would, as briefly as you can, but obviously as comprehensively as you can, and then we can get to the more general questions in a moment. So the first question, which quite a number of people have asked, which is, did you fail to operate the Maida Vale flood alleviation system on the 12th of July? So that's a question that quite a number of people have asked. The second question is, either before, during or after the flood, did Thames Water check that all sewers were functioning normally, is the second question. The third one is, what concrete measures are Thames Water putting in place to make sure this never happens again? And then the fourth question in this section is, what is Thames Water doing in relation to compensation? What would they be giving residents to cover out-of-pocket costs, such as insurance excesses, or rocketing future insurance premiums and compensation to recover unrecoverable losses? So let me pose those 4 questions to start with to Thames Water. If you'd like to sort of answer those as a group of questions. I've then got a couple of more general questions for our Chief Executive of Westminster, Stuart Love, and then I promise we will get to the more general questions. Please keep putting those in the chat. I'm going to be handed those in a moment, and I will ask those questions that you've posed in a moment. So back to Thames to cover those 4 questions, if you would.
Thank you. Yes, it's Matt Rimmer here.
Matt Rimmer, go ahead, please.
I'll pick up those questions. The first question, did we fail to operate the Maida Vale flood alleviation scheme? The short answer is no. There's no button that you press or valve that you open that opens or closes the flood alleviation scheme. It's always operating. It's always available. The volume of rain that hits that part of the London network, in combination with rainfall that hit elsewhere in London, meant that the system was simply overloaded, and you saw that in. I think we've all seen the pictures and the videos, and clearly a lot of you have actually lived through this, of the sewer network on the road lifting the manholes and sewage and water through rainfall coming out of that network and inundating the streets. So the volume of rainfall that came down that tried to enter into the sewers simply overwhelmed the capacity of the sewers to be able to remove that as quickly as would be the case. And even the flood alleviation schemes that were built in Maida Vale couldn't cope with that intensity. Just to give a comparison, I know that people have compared the 12th of July with the 25th of July, so what happened on Sunday. Our indications suggest that in the worst areas that were hit in the 12th of July, which was around the sort of Maida Vale, Paddington area, that was the most heavily intense rainfall, compared to the rainfall on the 25th, which landed in the worst of the area was in the Walthamstow area. Although the total volume of rainfall that fell on those 2 events was very similar, the rainfall fell in half the time in the Maida Vale area than in the Walthamstow area 2 weeks later. So it was the intensity and the pace at which that rain came down. It overwhelmed the drainage system, and the drainage system is not just the sewage system, it's the entirety of the drainage system, to such a point that there was no capacity left in the sewer network to be able to drain away. So hopefully that answers the question. Did you fail? The question was, did you fail to operate the system? The system is automatically operated. There's no button or lever to press. It's always on. Unfortunately, it was overwhelmed by the volume of rainfall that came down and the intensity of the rainfall that came down on the 12th. Have you checked your sewers before and afterwards? Did the automatic systems fail? I've just seen that question. No, they didn't. No, they didn't is the short answer. Do we check our sewers? Yes, we routinely do maintenance on our sewer network, and particularly down the Kilburn Park Road and that part of London, we have two very, very large sewers, one called a trunk sewer and one called a storm relief sewer. And we routinely walk those sewers on a reasonably routine basis to check to see if there's any blockages, any fatbergs, any issues that are there. I haven't got the details of when we went there before the event, but I know that immediately after the event, we were in that area and we entered the sewers in a number of different locations. I've seen pictures of the storm relief sewer, and there are no issues there that have been picked up. The only issue that we picked up post-event was that there was some storm damage to parts of the sewers. So we have areas where one sewer will overflow into another sewer, and we put boards between those sewers in order to change the level, and those are wooden boards, and some of them were smashed, and that's an indication of the intensity of the rainfall and the power of the water as it was charging down the sewer on the 12th. Measures for future protection. We are conducting the independent review. That's really, really important because we don't want to undertake any activities without really understanding the root cause of the issue and where we might be able to address it and where it's going to be very, very challenging to address it from a sewer capacity perspective. So the independent review is critical to it. My nervousness is that it's hard. I'm struggling to imagine how we're going to build our way out of the problem of the kind of intensity of rainfall that we saw on the 12th of July. That's a much wider issue than just the sewer network. You will have seen the Met Office reports recently about climate change. So I think this is, from my perspective, there may well be some network issues that we can improve on, some network capacity that we might be able to increase or modify, but I'm really nervous about raising anybody's expectation that we're going to be able to build our way out of this particular out of these kind of issues. The intensity of the rainfall that we saw on the 12th of July doesn't feel like it's the sort of thing that's not going to repeat. It feels like with some of the reports and indications we've got that might happen again, and in order to protect ourselves against that, that's bigger than just a sewer capacity issue. The last bit is on compensation. Your last question was on compensation, yeah. Which this won't be good news for anybody, I'm afraid, but we won't be offering compensation for this event. The Water Industry Act does not hold us liable for these kind of incidents unless there is a failure to act in a reasonably foreseeable way, or if there is negligence on our part. Our indications of what we've looked at on the sewer network so far suggest that this is not the case, and that's why at the moment it's very clear that we won't be offering compensation. If the independent review identifies something different, then that situation may well change. But as it stands at the moment, we aren't liable for these kind of downpours of rain that have caused the system to overload.
Okay, just before we finish on that point, Matt, what can you just make a comment about the scheme that offers some refunds on water rates? Does that not apply in terms of there's the scheme that people can get if they're having to leave their homes and they've had sewage in? Is there not a
that scheme does operate in circumstances where it's an operational issue that has caused the flooding. In this case, it's not an operational issue. The sewer, there wasn't a problem in the sewer. It was simply overwhelmed with the demand of water that was placed on it at that time.
Okay, right, thank you. I'm sure there'll be plenty more questions that we'll have later.
Councillor, sorry, Councillor, it's George Mayhew. Just to add to that, just very quickly.
Just go ahead, George.
We do have just for those people who are suffering financial hardship, there is a Thames Water Trust Fund, and people can find that online and apply for support through that. And right. Also we do have a scheme called Water Sure, which is a general scheme not related to an incident, but if our customers, your residents, are struggling to pay their bills, period, then they can go onto our website, Thames Water Sure, and again they can apply for a discount, what we call our social tariffs, to take the pressure off paying the bills.
Okay, well, we'll put those items in the chat, and we'll also circulate those on the website in due course. Thank you for that. Okay, two very quick questions to Chief Executive of Westminster before we get into the general questions. So question number one, Stuart, is what is Westminster doing to protect our properties in relation to it, because they haven't seen additional policing and they fear about squatters, etc., and also concerned about the number of homeless people housed in the area with COVID. People regard that as a risk. So that's the first question. And the second one for you, Stuart, is that am I expected to pay council tax on my property if it's been deemed inhabitable? So if you could just briefly answer those, Stuart, that'd be good.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kaplan. In terms of the first question, we were very conscious in the immediate aftermath of the flooding and having to accommodate people overnight. There was concern expressed to us by residents about safety of property. So we did get the police to have a greater presence on the ground at that particular point in time. Having seen the question specifically about squatting, we will again work with the police and try and identify those properties where there is a problem with squatting. What would be incredibly helpful is if somebody could maybe just contact me directly on my email address, slove@westminster.gov.uk, and let me know what those properties are so we can target them, again, working with the police. So we will get hold of the police. We'll make sure that we go out there again and see what else can possibly be done. In terms of the question on council tax, there are exemptions to which you can apply. I can't give you a general yes or no answer. What I can encourage those people who feel that your properties are uninhabitable and maybe for a period of time, please contact our Revenues and Benefits team. Have a look on our website and see if any of those exemptions you believe apply to you. We have to deal with that on an individual property by property basis. But as I say, there are exemptions and they may be applicable to your individual circumstances. So please have a look at that and contact our Revenues and Benefits team if you believe those exemptions are applicable to you. Thank you.
Those exemptions are in the chat.
We've just posted them in the chat as well.
Okay, so those details are in the chat. Okay, so right, going to get to questions. Lots of questions have come in. We'll get through as many as we can in this sort of session. So I'm going to take them in the order that I've been that they've come through on the chat. Apologies in advance if we don't get to every question, but we will get answers to any questions that we don't get to. If you post them in the chat, we don't get to you, then we will we'll make sure that we get sort of answers to them, and obviously we'll let you know after the meeting as well as to how we can answer other sort of questions going forward. So when you're called, if you could be as brief as you can, that would be really sort of helpful so that we can get through as many questions as we can. So when I call you, if you just let people know what area where you live roughly. You don't need to give the exact address so that there's that we understand, you know, sort of what area you're actually talking about. So the first person we've got on the list is Barb Diamond. So if you unmute yourself, then please ask your question. If you're still there, Barb.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay, go ahead. We can hear you. Well, we could a second ago. Are you still there, Bob? Just bear with us for a second.
Back in the lobby.
Okay. Technical difficulty. I will come back to you in a second, Bob. Don't worry. So I'm pretty. Okay. So the next person I have on my list, I'm sure he's there and knows how to use all this. So Councillor Barraclough, who's a Maida Vale councillor. So Jeff, can I get your question, please?
Thank you, Melvin. I have to say I'm not convinced so far by the answers we've got from either Thames Water or Westminster Council. It's not clear who's responsible for what, and particularly who is responsible for making sure this doesn't happen again. Because I think a lot of people around the table are nervous that if it rains again next week or the next year, we'll be in the same situation. So very important to know, what are the terms of reference of these inquiries that both the council and Thames Water are carrying out, and when will those reports be available?
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, so let me just turn. Matt, do you want to start first, or George?
Matt, go ahead. I'm happy to go first. Thank you, Councillor Barraclough. There is a very good description on the responsibilities around flooding on the London Council's website, which I've got in front of me. Which I'm happy to post the thing on the chat if that helps. But it's basically there's the lead local flood authority who's responsible, and their job is to work with the Environment Agency, Thames Water, and other stakeholders to manage flood risk. So there is clarity around that, I think, but I can understand why residents and others get confused. In terms of the investigation that we are going to be doing, I think there was a question from Chris Lees actually on the chat that sort of said, well, Thames Water would say its assets had failed, wouldn't it? Which I completely understand the scepticism, and that's part of the reason why we want to do an independent review. So hopefully you can, when it comes through, you can see what it says, and you know, it will land with credibility. In terms of time, Councillor Barraclough, it's going to take several months. This is the extent of the flooding across West London, and then of course the event that happened on Sunday, which adds to it, and the fact that we need to make sure that the terms of reference of the review have the council, Westminster City Council, have had a chance to input into that. We're taking inputs from calls like this to make sure that we reflect what you all say. It will take some time, so several months. And then finally, I've noticed also
to run that review yet.
Sorry,
have you appointed anyone to run the review yet?
No. So we've got a list of potential people, stroke organisations. But what we are also doing, and we had these conversations. We started these conversations this week. With our regulators, Ofwat and the Consumer Council for Water, to sort of work with them in a way that we can make sure that the appointment we make is, you know, passes the smell test, if you like. That for example, when you see who's going to be doing it, you can go, yep, okay, that's a person who's expert, and that's a person who is genuinely independent. So we're really making sure that the front end of this process is really solid. We had an experience about a decade ago in Swindon where we did a review, and your sort of contemporaries or colleagues in Wiltshire raised concerns about independence, and it was independent, but we didn't do a good enough job up front. So we're really going to try and make sure that we do a good job, so you can clearly see it's independent, and we will be absolutely liaising with the council on that.
Okay, just Kevin Goad, I think you're online. Do you want to just add to that from the council's point of view, Kevin?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Melvin. So the local authority responsibility is we have to develop a flood plan for the high risk areas, as George has mentioned, across the borough, and obviously we have issues in the Maida area, the Lisson Grove area, and south of the borough. That flood risk assessment is to inform how we design the drainage systems in the highway to get the water away to the sewer as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Part of that exercise is that, having devised a strategy, then we develop a regime around cleaning and maintenance and keeping those gullies clear to get the water away as quickly as possible. But we are dependent upon the capacity of the sewer to get that water away, as George mentioned. Our investigation is a statutory investigation under the flood legislation, which looks at the cause, the impact, and whether or not there was sufficiency in the sewer to dispose of the water. It also looks at the nature of the event and whether it was, as Thames referred to, one of those unprecedented events. So our review has started. We've already engaged with Thames Water. We're analysing all the data of those properties affected, what happened on those 2 evenings, and especially looking at the maintenance history to ensure those gullies were kept clean. We are looking to do a preliminary report in about 3 weeks' time, and then a further detailed report once the Thames independent report has been completed, so we can align those findings. Again, that is a report that is, I'm happy that is shared, because there's nothing to hide here. If there are insufficiencies in the surface water drainage, then we would need to address those.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Right. Next person, if they're there, is Mary Moore Mason. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. I am the co-chairman of the Hereford Road Association. We were not directly affected. However, all along Westbourne Grove, there were major problems of water going into the basements of restaurants, bookstores, newsagents, etc. Now, my understanding is that about 10 or 15 years ago, 3 very large tanks were built for this very problem in our area. One on Westbourne Grove, one on Chepstow Road, and one near the Hallfield Estate. My question is, did they come into any sort of action during this period? Were they effective? And if not, is there something that should be done to protect Westbourne Grove? I also have another unrelated question, but I'd like to hear back on that one first.
Okay, now can you just ask your second one as well? Because I need to get through questions quite quickly. We've got a lot of people on the line. Can you quickly ask your second question?
Well, the second one, this may be a little bit far-fetched, but quite a few people feel that this increasing development of sub basements in our area could, in the long run, contribute to this problem of the water table or whatever. Okay. I don't know if there are any thoughts on that, or if that's perhaps beyond the scope of this conversation.
Okay, Matt, if we could get a relatively quick answer here so we can get, I've got a lot of questions to get through. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, this is essentially a very similar question to the one that you posed about, did the Maida Vale scheme work? So the problems that you identified in Westbourne Grove, the schemes that exist around Maida Vale are all aimed at trying to reduce the impact in targeted areas, and obviously Westbourne Grove was one of those. So it's the same answer to the previous question, was that those schemes did what they were supposed to do, in that they took water took water and sewage away in the system to store it, but they were simply overwhelmed by the intensity of what came down. And the design of those systems is that they store it and then they pump it back to the network once there's space in the network, or once they start to fill up to a point at which there's further risk of flooding. The challenge was that they filled up so quickly that the point at which they needed to pump back into the network, there was still no space in the network. And there's a period of about 45 minutes from somewhere between 4:15 and 5 o'clock when our modelling demonstrates very, very clearly that in the Kilburn Park Road area, which is one of where the trunk sewers, one of our main sewers goes underneath, there was no capacity in that network at that stage for around about 45 minutes to an hour. It also helps to, if I could really quickly, it also helps to explain the question that's been posed in the chat a lot about how come the fire brigade pulled up a manhole and it all went away. The phenomenon that people witnessed there was the initial overloading of the system, which meant that the floodwaters rose, and there was nowhere for any water on the surface to escape to. As soon as you get any capacity in the network, that water tries to get down the roadside gullies into the sewers, but that's a limited channel. As soon as you pull up a manhole, you've suddenly got essentially a second plug hole on a bath. You suddenly drain away much more rapidly into the network, as long as that network has got capacity to take it. So that's the phenomenon that people noticed on that day.
And Matt, anything you want to say on basements?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good point. I would just add to the point that your councillor made, that Councillor Gope made earlier. There are surface water drainage, the water on the surface that needs to get into the sewers. You've got two choices. You either build a bigger sewer or you slow down the water going into that network. And one of the ways of slowing down the water going into that network is green spaces, is having a green space is a sponge. If you take any form of that green space away, you're reducing the size of that sponge. That's what happens when you dig out a basement and replace earth with a habitable space. You're reducing the capacity of the surrounding area to hold water, which is really important in slowing down that transfer of the water from the sky to the drains. That's a really, really critical part of the overall puzzle of how you address these problems in the future. So it's a very good point that was raised.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, let's see if we can go back to Barb Diamant. Are you there this time? Are you there, Barb?
Yes, I am, but you've answered all the questions I needed answering at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, we've had questions from Will and Hannah Griffiths about the fire brigade, which Matt has just covered. So I'm going to now turn to Simon Burkett. Simon. Are you there, Simon Burkett? Okay, well, Simon's question is, why does Thames Water consider that their network did not fail? Do you want to touch on that one there, Matt? Yeah,
I do. I mean, it's a really challenging one because, I mean, clearly the network couldn't take what it needed to take in that 45 minutes, an hour period, which contributed to the flooding. But in terms of what it was designed to take, it did take what it was designed to take. It was working at full capacity. So far, we've not seen anything in our initial investigation to suggest that it wasn't working at 100% capacity to try and drain that area. The reality was that it couldn't cope with what was coming at it.
Okay, that's helpful. As I say, we've got other questions here, which again talk about the fire brigade unplugging and seeing the water levels drop. Do you want to just say a few more words about that, Matt? It's a kind of recurring theme. Lots of people from different areas in terms of saying in my road, is it back to what you were saying in terms of your second plug on the bath? Is that what we were seeing all the time with the fire brigade, Matt?
So yes, you've got the combination of the whole network in the Maida Vale area in particular being overloaded. So there was nowhere for anything to go. And in fact, it was all coming back up. So that's why it was coming back up into properties and it was coming back up onto the surface. And you saw those pictures of manholes being lifted and the water and the sewage coming out onto the street. As soon as there's capacity in the network and the flow the water starts to flow again, the manholes drop back down and water starts to drain away. If you lift a manhole, you're basically helping that water to drain away, as long as there is capacity in the network for that to be taken. So we do see it on the clean water side of our business. If we have a clean water burst and we have a lot of water in the street, the first thing that the fire brigade do is lift a manhole to help reduce the impact of the flooding.
Okay, fine. One Freudian slip from you a moment ago. I mean, Kevin Goad is our Director of Highways, not a councillor, but I'm sure you called him Councillor Goad. Don't worry, he's Director of Highways. Councillor McKee, are you there? You have a question about what constitutes an emergency, but I'll let you ask the question yourself. Councillor McKee?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Guthrie. Thank you.
Good. My question, I mean, I think all the agencies involved have questions to answer. But as far as I can see, the prime leader to answer questions on this is the council. Obviously, Thames Water have to deal with the mechanism of flooding, as do the fire brigade. But the council has a responsibility to make sure that residents are safe. And my question is that surely there is an emergency protocol that the council, any local authority, has to follow. And in this case, the immediate steps that should be taken to protect residents and their property. My concern is that took some time.
Okay, I shall get Chief Executive Stuart to answer that one.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor McKee. You're absolutely right. The council has emergency planning protocols, including for floods. This was declared an emergency, and which results in various mechanisms within the council kicking into place. We ensure what we call a multi-agency response, which is why I referred to working with the fire brigade and other blue light services. What I also said, Councillor McKee, up front was part of the reviews we're looking at will also be into the council's initial response. So we always do that where there's been an emergency. We're doing that again. And as I said, are there things that we need to learn and do better as a result?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so there's another general kind of question for you, Matt, is that you talked about the systems being overwhelmed, volume intensity of rainfall. So the question that's being posed is, why don't you increase the capacity in the drainage systems? And as you know, because you and I have talked about this, Matt, that my own area, Maida Vale, Little Venice, we've had floods 3 times, 4 times in the last 10 years. So why don't you increase the capacity, and what does it take to do it? Obviously, you did it in Maida Vale. That wasn't enough. What's the plan, or what are you looking at in terms of getting that capacity where it needs to be? Matt? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, I guess what I'd want to put out there is, capacity is addressing the symptom. There are other ways of trying to address the overall problem. We're probably not going to be able to turn the tide on the rainfall. That's going to come. I think we can see that happening. But another way of addressing it is to try to, as I said, slow down the rainfall as it comes in, and give the system more opportunity and more time to be able to cope with what's coming at it. There is clearly some questions that need to be asked about our assumptions on capacity, and we work to regulated assumptions of the level of protection and the level of capacity that we provide across our network. That is laid down very clearly by Ofwat as to what they will fund us for. And if this review of this particular event highlights that is insufficient, then that will change a very big assumption in the planning of our overall network.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, Helen Bingham, are you there? You've got a question about super sewers. Helen Bingham?
Yes, really just wondering whether the super sewer will help solve this problem, and when the super sewer will be completed by.
Yeah, if I pick that one up, it's a great question. It's come up a number of times. So there's the headline is that the super sewer isn't a flood alleviation scheme. It's an environmental scheme. So its primary purpose is to prevent us dumping overflows of sewage into the River Thames, which is how the network was designed to do, because it's a combined network. On a normal day, all the ugly, foul, yucky stuff that just stays in the sewer, goes off to Beckton and gets treated and addressed. When it rains heavily, that same network is taking all of that, but the overflow goes into an overflow system and ends up in the river. And you'll be horrified to hear, but it is an unfortunate reality that on an average year that happens once a week. And that is what the Thames Tideway Tunnel is designed to stop happening, so that we don't put the overflow from our sewage into the river once a week. It will also have a small benefit for residents of that are close to the tunnel, close to the river, because it's been built underneath the river, of reducing what's called reducing the top level of water. So it basically just gives additional capacity to some areas of the network in these big storms. That is unlikely to impact the Maida Vale area. We're probably talking about an impact in the Hammersmith and Fulham area because they're closer to the river, but further up the network, as the Maida Vale residents are, it's less likely to have any kind of flood alleviation impact.
Okay, thank you. So next person I have on the list is Amy Rose. Amy, are you there? If you're not, I'll ask the question for you. I think I've got it here. What research do you do as a company in relation to climate change, which isn't a new concept? Isn't this something that you should be looking at, and why isn't Thames Water doing more on that? So Matt, do you want to pick that one up?
Do you want me? I'll pick that one up if that's all right, Councillor.
Okay, go ahead, George.
Yeah, so we do. So we do keep a close eye on weather patterns, but I think that what we do is we work really closely with the information that comes out of central government on this. There are, we're a water and waste company. We're not experts on climate change, but we do absolutely work to the policies set by government and then enforced by our regulators. But we also have quite a sort of a forward-thinking approach on climate change generally in terms of our own ambitions around getting to net zero by 2030, which I think is probably kind of slightly off topic, but it's for us and the rest of the water sector to work very closely with central government and the information that comes from central government on climate impacts.
Thank you. Okay, next person, Councillor Hugg. Adam, you've got a question. Would you like to ask that question, please?
Thanks very much, Melvin. And I mean, I think it has mostly been answered, but I think there needs to be a blow-by-blow account given, ideally now, if not at a later stage, about the specifics of what the fire brigade did on the ground. Obviously, you've talked about them raising the manhole cover. What was fed back to residents was that something more substantial was removed, and a number of residents were told that a blockage was removed. I think that's certainly been spread by, gone around the community, and I think there needs to be a detailed timeline of what precisely they did in addition to the manhole cover being removed. And again, just to reiterate the point about compensation, you guys are a monopoly, significantly profit-making monopoly, and I think it is therefore at best distasteful that you are not considering compensation to residents for this, particularly for those who are not covered by insurance. As I said, I think you have a duty of care to people that at the moment you're not fulfilling. But the question specifically about the blow-by-blow of what happened in addition to the manhole cover being raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Matt?
Yes. Yeah, happy to pick that one up. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is producing a timeline which we want to be able to share with your residents and other residents that shows pictorially the impact of the weather and the response of our assets in a sort of sliced timeline, so people can understand more easily what happened on the day. In relation to the blockage, I mean, I can't comment on the specifics because I wasn't there, but these are very, very big sewers. The Ranelagh sewer and the Northwest Storm Relief sewer are very, very big sewers. So I'm struggling to understand just how anybody could remove a blockage in the middle of a storm in that way. I'd be very impressed to be able to understand, to be able to know how that was achieved if that was the case. And I think although this is not, I think that the reality of the fact that this hit in so many different parts of London demonstrates really that this is not about an isolated blockage in one sewer or another. This is about a fundamental overload of the whole system.
Okay, and do you want to And Sir Adam's final point on the compensation. Do you want to just, we've heard you earlier, but do you want to just answer his specific point?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I find it personally very challenging when I hear some of the stories about people who are uninsured, and I completely understand the sentiment that is raised in that particular question, but I also know that the reality is that as laid down by the Water Industry Act, the liability for these kind of events doesn't sit with the water company.
Okay, let's move on to some more questions. So Mark Linehan. Mark, are you there?
Yes, hi. My question was really around, I mean, what we've heard is that in the event of a repeat of this, which is highly likely, Thames Water has pretty much admitted they won't be able to do anything differently than they've done this time, which means properties will be flooded again. What action can Thames Water and the council take to advise residents and businesses on mitigating this and taking whatever action they can to ensure that in the event of flooding, their properties are not as badly affected as they were this time? And just really, this wasn't my question, but a point to Matt. I really don't think it's acceptable to hide behind legislation. Residents in the borough have no choice but to buy their water services from you. And legislation really isn't a good enough defence for not offering compensation where it's clearly due.
Okay. Matt?
I understand your sentiment on compensation. I can't add to that particular conversation, I'm afraid. In relation to what can we do to reduce mitigation or to increase mitigation for any future events, it's really important to understand the mechanics of what happened. Therefore, that's why we want to do a proper review. But it's also very important to see this as an end-to-end system issue, because some people flooded through their sewers, some people flooded through rainfall coming down the steps and into their light well and through their doors. Some streets flooded because the roadside gullies were blocked. These are accountabilities that sit across a lot of different organisations, not just with Thames Water. I've certainly challenged myself. If I knew this was happening again in a year's time, what would my advice be? And it's not there. There are no easy and quick fixes to this particular situation. I do think that this is a cross-organisational flooding issue. That is the only way we're going to be able to offer good advice to residents, is we look at this as a holistic problem that we need to solve together, to be able to give you some short-term advice about protecting your properties.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and fit a couple more questions in before we get to the end of our time. So Dirk Struken, would you like to ask a question? Dirk, are you there? Okay, doesn't seem to be letting me. I think I've got most of the detail here. He wants to know, in terms of data on rainfall over the past few years, can you talk a bit more about that and actually explain, as you've been saying, why is this such a rare event, and could you not have expected and anticipated this? Do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I've looked at data over the last 5 years, and I know that's only a short period of time. The 12th of July was the wettest day over the last 5 years. But what was worse about the 12th of July was the intensity. That month's worth of rain came down in an hour. If you compare it to 2 weeks later, we had a similar amount of rain in Walthamstow. That came down in 3 hours. And it was the intensity of that rainfall that particularly impacted the Maida Vale area. The other uniqueness of this particular storm, and I know it's crazy to talk about uniqueness in this sort of environment, but the phenomenon that we experienced in the Maida Vale area was a combination of the layout of the sewer. So if you think about how the sewers drain, how the water drains, they drain north to south essentially. So what lands in Brent comes into the sewers in Brent, and it comes down through Westminster, through RBKC, Hammersmith and Fulham, and down to the river, which is where it ends up, or is taken off down to Beckton for treatment. So you have that north-south natural voyage of any water that lands. The storm, when it came in, moved north-south. So it was particularly intense over the Brent area before getting even worse over the Maida Vale area, and then slightly easier as it moved down into Paddington and Hammersmith, but it was still very intense. And what you had is the combination of it being at its most intense over Maida Vale, approximately 20 to 30 minutes after it had just absolutely chucked it down in the Brent zone. And obviously what it throws down in Brent gets into the sewers and makes its way down. Now, I'm not a meteorologist or an expert in this area, but my assumption at this stage is that, and from what I've seen of the data, is you have that combination of intense rainfall in the localized area. At the same time, the sewer is already very full from what else has happened wider in the catchment. And that's why when you look at this from a solution perspective, you can't look at it just locally. You've got to look at it wider. What might we be able to do in the Brent zone that slows the water coming down, so that when it does chuck it down in Maida Vale, where you might not be able to have as much, you might not be able to mitigate as much, there is capacity in the network to take it. What we saw on the 12th of July was a sewer that was full of rainfall that had come from other parts of the catchment, leaving absolutely no space for anything that was falling in that area at the time.
Okay, I'm going to overrun a little bit because we've got a lot of people online, a lot of questions sort of coming through, if that's okay with everybody, not by too much. Okay, Nigel Stokes, would you like to ask a question, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kaplan. I'm wondering about practical measures at the household level, for example, non-return valves, and whether that is feasible for the worst affected properties, for example, in Formosa Street, where they really are in a very vulnerable position. I'm on Formosa Street as well. Some of the people I represent have been flooded numerous times. Is there any way of implementing local solutions or indeed advising householders what they can do?
Matt?
Yeah, sorry, just going for the button. Yeah, yeah, yes is the short answer is yes, but in order to be able to get to that point about giving people advice, you've got to understand the method of flooding. You can put a non-return valve on, but that won't protect you from flooding if you're flooded by water coming over land and down the light well or down the steps into your house. So there are property level protection that you can put onto your house. The one that has the biggest impact, but is very hard to do in central London, is trying to disconnect your surface water runoff from your foul system. And if you live in London and you have the ability to put a soakaway into your garden and put your roof drainage into that rather than into the drains, then you're going to make a bit of a difference at a local level, and then you'll be protected. If you combine that with a non-return valve, then you do give yourself a bit of protection. But these are all almost every house will have a different configuration of the network, will have a slightly different configuration of what is draining from their house or their property, and will have a slightly different form of flooding that they will have experienced on the 12th of July. So they are very bespoke, they are very individual levels of protection that can be offered.
Okay, so we've got loads more questions that we've not got to yet. So what we're going to do with all of those, and I'm sure Thames Water are happy to do this, and obviously the council as well, is that any of the questions that we've not got to, and I've tried to group them together as we're sort of going through, we'll make sure that all of those questions are answered and that information sent through to everybody, put on our website and everything else. Just going to ask Stuart Love if he's got a final few words on the council side to say, and then obviously I'll ask Thames Water to do the same as well in a moment. Stuart, would you just like to say a few words on next steps and things like that?
Thank you, Melvin. Just again to say thank you to all of you for coming along this morning, for asking your questions, and also for all of your comments in the chat. I think one of the things we do need to do, Kevin did answer the question around our reviews, but I think we need to publish to all of you the scope of those reviews, how we're going to go about them, and the timescale. So that's something we will pick up on the back of this and communicate directly back to residents, so you have a sense of what we're doing by when and when you can expect to see some outcomes. I think probably, Melvin, that's it, if that's okay.
Okay. So Matt or George, do you want to just say a few general sort of words?
Yes, I'll do it. First of all, just thank you very much for your questions. Just to say that I think this has been recorded, so we will make sure that we'll answer all the questions that councillor you said that will come through. We'll get that done, but also we will make sure that the views from you are reflected, as I said, in that independent review that we talked about. I don't know, councillor, if it's worth just mentioning the mayor's roundtable that I know you attended on earlier on this week, where to Matt's point about we got to look at it sort of multi-borough in a way, given the way the water flows. The mayor has put in place a broader review, I think, to look at flood mitigation issues across the whole of London, which I think is longer term, but will also help. But thank you so much for your questions. We really appreciate them.
Okay, so we could go on for a lot longer in this sort of meeting, and but I think what I'm conscious of is there's quite a lot of unanswered questions that have been left on the table today. Some of those may or may not get answered by the various reviews that are going to take place, but obviously it's important that they do take place and they take place in a quick manner. But I'm very conscious, and I think everybody on this call is that as we said at the beginning, this has affected hundreds of people's lives, and it's extremely upsetting, distressing, and everything else that goes with it. And obviously my sympathy goes to everybody that's been affected in that way. And I know other councillors, myself included, we've been spending a lot of time with residents over the last couple of weeks, and obviously we'll continue to do so, because
Melvin.
You've muted yourself.
Sorry, Councillor Kaplan, you're muted.
Okay, I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you. So somebody managed to mute me as well. So apologies. I don't know at what point I got muted, but I'm just saying, this is not the end of the process. We need to make sure that we keep in contact with everybody going forward. There is a plan to hold a scrutiny meeting, which will be a public meeting in September. Councillor Mahindra, who's the chairman of that committee, will put that together. I think that's very important to do so, and we would hope by that stage to have some more answers to some of the questions that clearly today have gone unanswered. We will continue to put items on the website to keep people updated, and obviously people please keep in touch with your councillors, keep in touch with the council sort of generally with emails and everything else, so we can actually get more answers and more information. Because what is very clear, because I've been seeing all the questions that they've come through, is a lot of still unanswered questions. I'm grateful, obviously, for the people on Thames trying to answer some of these questions, the council as well. It is complicated. It's not a straightforward situation as to how everything sort of connects together. But the bottom line, and you were mentioning this point a moment ago, George, is that we've got to find a way of the agencies involved in working more closely together. We've got to find a way of stopping these horrific events. Personally been involved with 3 in the last 10 years. I don't want to be involved with another one. So we've got to actually look at that and find a way forward. There's lots of questions that have to be answered of what's happened, absolutely, but a lot of questions that need to be answered in relation to how we find sort of a way forward. The Mayor did a round table, which Karen Buck MP attended, I attended earlier this week. And again, there is a desire for all the agencies, the London Fire Brigade, the Environment Agency, everybody to work together. So that is something we have to do. This is not a party political thing. This is very much people's lives, people's communities. We've all got to work together on that, and we will do so. This meeting has been recorded. More than 220 people have attended, huge attendance for lunchtime on a Friday. Absolutely, we will look at more meetings going forward. conscious that we haven't done an evening meeting. The scrutiny meeting will be an evening meeting. We'll look at other meetings as we seek to answer sort of questions that are going forward. So thank you all for your contributions today. We will post on the website, we'll post in the chats we've been doing through, more ways of actually getting dialogue sort of going. This is something which we all are treating incredibly seriously. It is a massive sort of issue, and we've got to find ways, as I've said a moment ago, of finding solutions that move forward. Capacity is a massive issue, been mentioned lots and lots of times, and that obviously is going to be high up the list of how do we get more capacity, how do we actually stop these things. Climate emergency, we're all aware of, is a massive issue. It's not going to go away, so we've got to find ways of moving sort of forward on this. So thank you all for your time today. We will continue this dialogue, we'll continue to communicate, and we've got to final note, find a way forward, because we cannot have these things happening with the regularity they've happened in the last 2 weeks. We're all on that same page. Solutions not all offered today, but everybody has got to work together to find those sort of ways forward. As I say, we will keep in touch with everybody because there's a lot of detailed points that we didn't get to answer on this, and we will look to answer those going forward. So thank you all very much for your time, and as I say, we will keep in touch and continue to work together. So thank you all very much, and goodbye.
They're lying.
Ah. Does anyone know how to record the chat?
I think you can just copy and paste it, actually.
I've tried that, but it doesn't work. Maybe it's a team thing. Maybe you can only do it with Zoom.
Which bit do you want to copy?
Well, all the questions.
Yeah, the problem is that if you did that, I'll have a go, but the problem is that they're not all expanded, if you get me. But I'll have a go at recording the beginning of them. Hang on.
True. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I can do it.
I can't copy and paste.
Oh no, I can only do it one by one, actually.
Yeah, I can't even do it one by one.
Well, I'm trying.
I don't know if it'll be in the recording or not.
So you can
It
take
might be.
screenshots. You can take screenshots of the chat.
God, but how many screenshots would it take? 3 million.
Well, it'll take a long time, but you know.
Yeah, it'll disappear by then, isn't it? I mean, this is not going to stay up. They've stupidly left the meeting kind of open. They should close it down.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Crazy.
Next month should be fun when they have more floods, I guess.
Oof. Yeah, I can't. I don't know why, but I can't. It's closed up the chat. That's interesting.
It's a shame.
I've still got the chat there, but you can't copy any of it.
Okay, right. I'm just
move to a right click. Oh.
No, sorry, I don't know why, but it was doing it before, but now it's stopped. So I don't seem to be able to copy it. But maybe it will be available as part of the recording.
Yeah, sometimes they do that, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean,
did you think that any of that was adequate?
well, at least I think Melvin was very good there, cheering all that, to be honest.
Well, he's obviously a decent bloke. And well, you know, I mean, this isn't an easy issue, as he said, but I mean, I just can't get my head around how crap Thames Water's, you know, actual service to us is, when even when, you know, we're paying more than any other local authority in the country, and they don't even survey the properties that have been, as far as I can work out. I have had no, and none of the friends or the people that I'm in contact with have had any survey. No one surveyed that, so.
They've not been anywhere near my property.
No.
They were on the street handing out bottles of water. That was about what they did. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Yeah. I think the whole thing was a complete and utter whitewash, which is what I expected it to be anyway. Melvin's a good guy and he's a decent person, but the rest of them I think are just a waste of space, frankly. And to be told, you know, it was an act of God in effect. Yeah, okay. So you take a plug out of a bath, and if there's capacity beneath it, the water will go down. I actually wasn't there. My partner's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and actually we weren't there. Because of what's happened, the sheer devastation. We've lost 92% of all of our possessions. I was away for a week. We fortunately are insured, but we're one of 150 houses on my road that's insured. We're only one of 4 houses out of 150 that are insured.
Oh dear.
And it's just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. We don't even know where we
stay.
No, it's on Kilburn Park Road.
Oh, Kilburn Park, yeah.
Yeah. And apparently our neighbours, everybody's even said this on the day that it happened, that actually there was concrete in one of the drains and the fire brigade removed it, and when they removed it, the water went down.
Wow.
So why weren't the fire brigade present at this meeting? Absolutely, why were they? Well, they know that. They absolutely know that, because actually apparently even Councillor Barcliffe knows that, because the councillors all came round to the street the day after it happened, is what I understand. So they all know exactly what happened. It's just a complete and utter whitewash. And when it was flooded 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, they put in a new drain on Sherland Road at the bottom of Kilburn Park Road, and also on a road that links Malvern and Kilburn Park Road. Huge drain, you could stand in the damn thing, because the houses opposite were getting flooded. They all had wooden floors, not concrete floors. My house was about 10 doors up, has a concrete floor. It came through the bath, it came through the toilet, it came through the drain outside the door, 5 feet of water outside the door, 4 feet of water at the back, and 2.5 feet right the way through the house. The drains 2 weeks before this incident, the Housing Association, who were doing some cyclical works, sent in a company to inspect the drains with a camera. There was nothing wrong with the drains. And they went all the way from the back of the house, all the way through. There's a direct drain from the back of my house, all the way through to the front where the drain starts into the sewer. There was nothing wrong at all with those drains.
But was there a may I ask, was there a non-return valve fitted? Because that's
I think there probably is, because outside of my front door, we've got there's like a drain hatch. It's only a small one, but when you lift it, and I've lifted it many times to clean the front, it's about 9 feet deep. Now, one time there was somebody from one of the upper flats had caused a blockage in the drain, and we had to get someone out to clear it. And there is like a gate. I think it probably is a non-return flap. It's like a gate, and that gate was blocked so the water couldn't flow away. As soon as they released that gate, the water then flowed away. So this was some time ago. So there definitely is something there.
Yes.
The water came up in every place that you can possibly think of. And yet when I arrived back, when my friend went into my property the day after on the 13th, because she goes in every day to check my posting if I'm away, there was no visible water in my house. And yet there was 2.5 feet of water in that house. And I know that because we've got a back boiler, and the back boiler was flooded up to 2 feet. So, and you can see the tide mark in every single room. You can see the tide mark.
That's right.
Every single room.
Well, the thing is, we had a basement garage flooded, and we invited the council to come down. Our problem is that we're right on the border between two councils, between Camden on one side and Westminster on the other. And when you speak to one, they'll refer you to the other.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy came down and he said, well, there's no evidence of water now. I said, no, of course there isn't. But if you go to that wall, you'll see we were flooded out to the extent of 5 feet. There's the evidence. But then they say, yeah, well, we'll come back. Then they have these discussions, and so it goes on. And meanwhile, we're none the wiser. And I suspect that's how it has been for quite a few other people. I mean, that flood was, we've got photographs. We've sent them to the council. There was someone actually in one of the flats who actually did a video camera, and our property is actually adjacent with a road crossing that, with the wisdom of one of the councils, was inserted right there when there's a ramp downward into our property. And that accentuated the position, and that's how we've been for some years. And so, you know, if there's another flood that comes in August, we await with bated breath the deliberations that are coming out in September. But this is going to be an ongoing thing, as I see it.
Yeah, and it never was. It never was. I mean, we lived there for 26 years and we've never had a problem like that. Never, ever.
So you guys, do you know about the possible class action?
No.
Yeah, one of my neighbours has told me
that. What is it?
I mean, if you want to email me, I'll try and get you some more information about it, because I think the only thing that we can really practically do is try to act in concert with each other and in numbers. So there's a chap, I've forgotten his name. I've forgotten his name. But there is a chap who's he's actually RC Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, but he's thinking of mounting a class action against Thames Water. And you know, is willing to chat to people. There are a couple of WhatsApp groups going on with people trying to talk to each other. I haven't, because we've been talking, I haven't actually looked to see what people are saying on that. But anyway, I can certainly put you in touch with, his name's Henry Davey or something. And, you know, you can keep an eye on that. Do you want to have my email address?
Yeah, that'd be good.
So that would be very helpful.
It's my email. It is Alto, which is AALTO.
Yes.
At sky.com.
Thank you. Alto at sky.com. Double A.
Double A. My name is Gaynor Altonen. So yeah, if you want, I'll just put you in touch with the network, and you know, hopefully we can all try to act together. I mean, I think that, you know, Westminster Council doesn't want this to happen again, but what I don't understand, and so, you know, I wouldn't want to get all conspiracy theory about, you know, them and their involvement, but I just do not understand why what they said was going to happen didn't happen, which is that Karen Buck was going to attend the meeting, the fire brigade was going to attend the meeting, the housing associations involved. What happened? None of my questions got asked. I know this woman called Amy Rose. Only her most anodyne point was asked. So, you know, I think we need to take more concerted action if we can.
Karen Buck is MP for which area?
For she's our area in Westminster, so she's Westminster. I think it's Westminster North's MP. There's also recently been a meeting with the MP.
Hi all, just to make sure we're just going to close this chat now. So if you could all please, we're just going to shut this meeting off because we need to get the recording up. So if you could please,
all right, yeah,
kindly, as I
we'll be in touch.
Chat, make your way. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, bye.
Bye then.
All right. Thank you very much.